Okay, good morning. Good morning, Odion. Can we start now? Can you put the music off? Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Odion. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning. I would like a very big thank you to the organizing committee, Chimere and his team. Over the last couple of weeks, there's been a flurry of activity to put together this event. I would like to say a very big thank you to all the people that supported the event, and thank you for putting together an event. Annually, the Lagos section, Section 61 of the Society of Petroleum Engineers, we would typically have a symposium that tends to be themed around a topical issue that is, trending in the industry. And today is, we're going to be talking about, our theme today is creating a sustainable energy future for Nigeria, opportunities for indigenous capacities development. Now, before I start, let me give you a quick intro to what we are going to do today. Now, in the last 10 years, Nigeria energy industry have been faced with several growth challenges, including policy uncertainty, inadequate investments in the sector, global crunch on fossil fuel investments, etc. Now, these challenges have been created a situation where the country cannot meet its energy demands with regards to electricity generation, transportation use, etc. Given these issues and the need to create a sustainable energy future for our people, the onus falls on the indigenous to step up and fill the void left due to these challenges. To fill this void, one of the major constraints faced by local companies is inadequate technical and financial capacities. So for this reason, there is need to grow our local competence. Now, today's symposium, creating a sustainable energy future for Nigeria, opportunities for indigenous capacity development, is targeted at exploring how indigenous companies grow their capacities and create energy abundance in Nigeria. Additionally, we will also discuss the issues and enablers to achieve this, as well as the role of SPE in bridging the technical skills gap. Joining us today, we have seasoned executives, and we are very, very much grateful to them for making our time to join us today. So we've got Mr. Austin Avuru, we've got Mr. Chikeze Nwosu, and we've got Engineer Mrs. Oluseyi, finally, Mr. Salahuddin Tahir. As we go further down, we are going to read their bio and introduce them properly. So again, join me in welcoming our speakers. We would like to also welcome each and every one of you that have made out time to join us from, different parts of Nigeria and probably different parts of the world. We welcome every single one of you. So today, my name is Obianoji Bokwe, and I'm the secretary of the section, and I'm going to be the master of ceremony for today's event. Let me quickly run you through what we've lined up for you today. So we're going to start off with a quick safety moment. After the safety moment, we're going to have our national anthem. And right after that, we're going to have a welcome address and opening remarks by our section chair and also the Nigeria Council chairman. Thank you, Mr. Felix, for joining us. And right after that, we're going to go through the keynote speech, okay, and then jump into the panel session. And afterwards, we're going to have a vote of thanks, and then we'll close the event. Now, the next thing on our agenda is the safety moment. Oh, dear. Thank you. Now, for safety moment, about malaria safety for the rainy season. I mean, I think this is one very important topic at this time of the year because we have the rain coming in, falling on us, heavily. And I just wanted, as a reminder, because I believe every one of us, we are quite familiar with malaria. So this is more of a reminder than anything else. So I just wanted to point out that it's very important that if you have mosquitoes around the area where you live, you might want to invest in an insecticide-treated nets. Use those to cover your beds, and if possible, if you can keep your surroundings, your room, whatever, a bit cooler, so that it will, thank you, so that it will take the insects away, far away from you. Another thing is, if you're going outside, especially in the evenings, you might want to have your repellent creams and sprays, put them on, minimize the amount of insects that will be biting you as you stay outside. In addition, you can also, you might also want to wear long sleeve shirts. You might also want to wear long pants just to keep, minimize the amount of mosquito bites on your body. Now, the last point there is the preventive medication. So this part, I decided to dwell a little bit on this part because most times when we are sick, we tend to just go quickly to grab something and take it, we tend to self-medicate. Okay, so I just wanted to point out that first of all, there's preventive medication, which you can take as often just to keep the malaria away. And additionally, try not to self-medicate, try to get the doctor to look before you decide it's actually malaria. So this is very important because I'm aware that in Nigeria, we quickly self-medicate, but it's very important that all sort of make sure we are treating malaria and not something else. So if it's a flu-like symptom, it's very important that you treat it as emergency and to the clinic as quickly as possible. So that is it on the safety moment, and we will move on now to take the national anthem. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next up is our welcome address by the section. So Priscilla, delectable Priscilla Enwere. Good. So the floor is yours, Madam Priscilla. Thank you. Hello, Priscilla.
Hello there, good morning. I'm sorry I got disconnected. I have a bit of network problem.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, speakers, and you all who have joined us on this symposium today. Thank you for joining us. To our able council chair, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this very important event today to discuss a subject that is crucial for the country's oil and gas industry. As we know, capacity development and building local competence are critical for independent operators, especially they assume assets that are ownership of assets that are currently being divested by IOCs. This is important to ensure the growth and sustainability of our country. We have in our midst today very distinguished and seasoned industry professionals who have walked the talk, as is evident in the very company businesses that they have built, sustained, and are currently running. We at SPE Lagos are very grateful that our invitation. SPE's vision is to ensure that the world's energy needs are met safely, securely, and sustainably. And as SPE has remained steadfast in its mission by evolving and staying relevant today while being forward-looking and working very actively to create the energy future. It is in line with this. We continue to beam the spotlight on very topical issues and seek ways to address them. In the next hours, we will learn, engage, and leave here more knowledgeable than we came. So I'm glad that we're having this symposium today. And thank you all for coming, and look forward to a fantastic session. Thank you.
Priscilla. Thank you very much for that short and opening speech, welcome address. It appears the next thing on the agenda is the opening. We'll skip it for now. Mr. Felix is unavoidable absent. He will join us shortly. So we'll move on quickly to the keynote speech. And for the keynote speech, our ever-present Mr. Austin Avuru, who is the Executive Chairman of AA Holdings Limited. Now, let me a little bit about Austin. I actually want to read his bio. Hold on. Thank you. Now, Mr. Avuru is a specialist per excellence with a vast experience in the oil and gas industry that has spanned more than 40 years. He is an erudite scholar and paper presenter on topical issues in the oil and gas industry, and a major proponent of content initiative in the upstream sector. He has many local and international publications to his credit, among politics, economics, and the Nigerian petroleum industry. Another one is My Entrepreneurship Journey, and he is also a co-author of Nigerian Petroleum Business, a Handbook. Mr. Avuru has a BSc on honors from geology from the University of Nigeria, 1980. He's a postgraduate diploma holder in petroleum engineering. He is also a Association of Petroleum Explorationists. He has 42 years cumulative oil and gas industry experience and has held several examples in major companies such as NNPC, Allied Energies, and Seplat. He is a founding managing director of Platform Petroleum Limited and is currently the chairman and chief executive of Austin Avuru Holdings Limited. So everybody, please join me as we welcome Mr. Avuru. Thank you, sir, for making our time. Thank you for joining us. Odeon, please put on his slides, please. Thank you. Mr. Austin, sir.
Yes, please take the slide back to the first page. Okay, thank you very much. And it's my pleasure to join you all this morning to share my views on this topic about creating energy sustainable future for our country and the opportunities that exist for indigenous capacity. So let me go straight into my discussion. I'm hoping to spend 30 minutes so there, and then give room to the panel to then elaborate more on the issues that will arise out of this discussion. The next slide, please. So let's first look at Nigeria's energy deficit. Just a few figures to 82 million of our 200 million Nigerians do not have access to electricity. 140 million of our 200 million Nigerians do not have access to clean cooking. Gas supply today to the domestic market remains a miserly 1.1 BCF per day. Now, when we started this gas master plan back in 2012, I moved domestic gas supply from about 200, 300 million scoff a day that you want to about 900 million scoff a day within a couple of years. We were expecting that by 2017, we'll be close to 2 BCF a day. And of course, concurrent electricity generation should have gone to about 10 gigawatts. Those were the projections. But here we are, 23, domestic gas supply is still about 1.1 BCF per day. And that's also about the demand. They don't mind, people will say a shortage of gas, and that's why we don't have enough electricity generation. I can tell you, there are gas suppliers that have excess gas in the pipe that are not being taken. So around supply and demand today is about 1.1 BCF per day. A far cry from close to 3 BCF per day that we projected by now. Over 85% of our petroleum products, this is probably even too optimistic. Sometimes by 100% of our petroleum products are imported as we speak. Now, in terms of energy, let's emphasize that gas is our energy transition fuel, and even down to 2040, it remains the main source of power generation in this country. Even up to that date, we still anticipate gas will probably be responsible for generating between 60 and 70% of our electricity, and then other portions of that capacity come from hydro, and then eventually from solar to supplement. But gas remains very critical to electricity requirements. Let's look at where we situate within the global energy transition. Because what we have seen, the energy transition has had quite significant impact on how we do business today in the oil and gas sector in Nigeria. So investor funds into the oil and gas sector are thinning out. You know, IOCs are redirecting capex to renew. Started slowly, but when you plot the graph to 2040, 2050, you will find out that a lot of available capex IOCs will be going into renewables and very little left for fossil fuels. Banks are now reluctant to lend to the sector. Everybody was cleaner, and even when you manage to secure funding, those of you who have secured funding recently, you know what you go through in terms of meeting strict, clean energy requirements, even to get funding into the gas sector today. So investors are under pressure to flee the oil and gas sector, and in our particular case, I am walking away from mature assets. We have to come to the realization that the Niger Delta Basin is 60 years old, 65 as a basin. And so when you then see the combination of the pressures from global energy transition, all the issues we raised above, investors moving away, IOCs redirecting their capex, and again, cleaner energy, sustainable energy push, people and funding partners are moving away from the sector. When you add all of these factors to the fact that our basin is so mature, what you then see is that the exit doors of the IOCs are now thrown wide open, leaving local independence to struggle to fill the yawning gap. Now, sometimes it is easy to blame the victim. I say the victim in this instance will be the local independent. We've had a situation, the local independents, nor the Nigerian government asked anybody to leave. No, none of us asked to leave. They are leaving because of the factors that I've just enumerated above. And we're even fortunate in this part of the third world. We have independents that are even struggling to fill the gap. Elsewhere in the world, some international independents will come in on their own terms to try and fill in the gap. So when I say don't blame the victim, so when we are quick to blame the local independents who are not performing well, we'll discuss that very soon. But I'm saying they are the ones upon whose shoulders we have thrust the responsibility of taking over those who are living on their own volition. And therefore, rather than chastise them or blame them, we should be asking ourselves what real plans, what policy initiatives do we have in place to groom these local initiatives, create the capacity that they need, and make them perform these responsibilities for themselves and on behalf of the country and our industry. But this is where we are today. The combination of pressures from global energy transition and the maturity of the Niger Delta Basin means that the exit doors of the houses are now open, independents to struggle to fill the yawning gap. I'd like that to be emphasized. And let's not be deceived. What we're told today is IOCs are only retreating from the onshore and shallow water and going into the deep water. Yeah, but go back and plot the graph of deep water production from inception to date, and what you're seeing is a steady decline, that more than 15%. Now, I'm not seeing enough activity in the deep water to stem the decline. What that means is that in another 5 to 7 years, we'll probably be in deep water where we are now in the shallow offshore and in the onshore. And it will be the same story. Again, mature. The same way that the doors of the shallow water and the onshore have been thrown open, they will be thrown open in the deep offshore, because that's just the nature of our business. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Houses are retreating. Where are the independents that will move in to take their place? Historically, NNPC in JV and PSC relationships in a non-operating position with the IOCs. It's been a relationship that they have been in since the JVs were introduced, and PSCs came in a few years later, about 1973 to 1975. And the way this works is IOCs themselves, because of their international governance structure and operating reliability, NPC didn't have much work to do in terms of checking or supervising their JV partners in any way, because their own operate at standards that are international. So there was very little audit that was required. And so NNPC was in a comfortable position working with 6, 7 international oil companies in JV and PSC relationships. And this company of the 2 to 2.7 million barrels per day that the country was used to. But now, NNPC is now having to try and work out relationships with Nigerian independents. I can tell you from experience that not a very smooth relationship. And the reason is when you start from the premise that, especially if we decide to pick a few of them and beat our chest and say these ones, they're not doing the right thing, they don't have enough execution capacity, their governance structure is shaky or non-existent. When you start on those negative notes, you have to have a strong relationship. You're going to have a shaky relationship. And we're seeing it in some of the JVs, what is happening. So NPC itself, as a big partner, is moving through a transition that is difficult to manage between stable relationships with IOCs, whose competencies are not in doubt, whose governance structures are not in doubt, into relationships with Nigerian independents who are still learning to walk the ropes. And so my question what policy imperatives are required to nurture a crop of competent independence? Because that's really what in other sectors we've had this. I mean, the bank sector had 199 banks before we were down to 24. Probably not the most efficient, but we cannot say today that our banking sector is not light enough to take on big risks. So we've had it in telecoms, we've had it in other areas. And as I said at the beginning, I needed to emphasize the fact of not blaming the victim. These independence responsibilities have been thrust on their shoulders. So it's not about sitting back to fingers about how incompetent they are. It's about what do we do as an industry and as a nation to make sure that a crop of competent ones among the several independents are then nurtured to move into this space. What policy imperatives are required? And even for the existing independents, what are we doing to build capacity and take advantage of the opportunities we have here? I think these are the key questions. Let's go to the next slide and we'll start looking at the impact of this. So now we come to the crux of the matter, capacity development. Now the retreating at well developed, comprehensive cradle to grave training programs for all their professional staff. So if you join Shell as a 2-year-old petroleum engineer, drilling engineer, an accountant, a lawyer, whichever one, there was a training schedule that was in place, even without your knowing. So they send you to your first induction program, they send you to the next program, maybe in The Hague, and then you come back. Now, for every movement from one level of responsibility to another, there was a program that you trained. And then you added all of this to some localized intensive training programs they had, even for their artisans and some non-technical staff. And then added to all these were cross postings. So that by the time you found a Nigerian with 15 years experience in Shell, and this is, I'm just using Shell, the same thing with all of them, whether it was Chevron, whether it was ExxonMobil, whether it was Total, it was the same thing. By the time you find an engineer, a professional with 15 years experience at a level heading a unit or a department, he has had a suite of training designed to prepare him for that responsibility. He most likely also designed to expose him to international work schemes and how things are done around the world. What we have done when we set up our own independence was to then go look for those Shell, ExxonMobil, Total staff, 5 years experience, who were just leaving or who managed to poach. And they became the bedrock of our staffing when we started these companies. I'm in them, or the people we hired, 10, 15 years ago who were 45 and now approaching 60. Those we hired in the same plant 20 years ago have now retired. So we're seeing a stream of those people that we hired who benefited from all of this training from their former employer retiring. And I'm asking myself, where is the talent pipeline to replace them? And where would this talent pipeline from when we do not have the facilities and the structure that these houses had or still have that gave rise to intensive training that were hiring? Not just the IOCs, international service providers. Today, I tell you that the knowledge I have about log interpretation were the 3 modules of the famous Schlumberger, the introductory, the inter and advanced log interpretation courses that as well site geologists and petroleum engineers were all attended during our time. So even the international service providers, Schlumberger, Baker, Setco Forex for the drilling folks. So they also had their own comprehensive training facilities and modules for their personnel. But in their own case, not just for their personnel, they also managed to make some of these training modules available to staff of their clients. So if MPC well engineer or share well site engineer, you benefited from some of this training from service providers, in addition to what your well-structured employer provided for you. So between the IOCs and the service providers, almost all the training that our industry required was available. We didn't know, just both as a nation, as an industry, because it was in place. Also known to us is that between the IOCs and the service providers, the elaborate capabilities that their offices had supported the business without our knowing. So the innovations we're seeing in the industry arose behind the scenes research capabilities that these big organizations had. That's the that we have been used to the past 50 years. So go to the next slide, and then you see what our dilemma is today. Now this is where we are. We have the double whammy of local operators and local service providers. Both of lack both training and research capabilities. The result today is that execution capacity is poor and dwindling, and costs are escalating. This is where we have to tell ourselves some home truth. We're all authors to local content script, which we started in 2000 before it became law in 2010. And we like the emergence of indigenous service providers and indigenous operators, but it has come at a cost. It's time to start asking ourselves, how do we address the issues that come this, what I call the double whammy? So I don't know the independent today that has anything close to the training structure, even just the structure, not even the capabilities. How many independents today have a recruitment process such that you are bringing in young graduates and over time training them to take higher responsibilities, and as they're moving up, there's a time of younger graduates are coming in to take over from them? How many of these independents have any access to any kind of research, even if it's third-party support? And then, because of the very laudable and rigid implementation of our local content laws, a number of services that the international service who had all these things I described earlier, training, research, and therefore innovations, a lot of those services, through the implementation of our local content policies, have now been passed on to local service providers. And just like the local operators, the local service providers neither have the structure, the training facilities, nor the research backup to talk about it. So what do we have today? We are drilling a well onshore. Onshore rigs by Local Content Act can only be provided by local companies. So all the drilling companies we were used to when we were growing up, whether it was Data, whether it was Seco Forex, they're all gone. That's fine. So we have locals, Nigerians, who are now drilling contractors. But honestly, what has happened to our NPT? What has happened to our costs? Even big, most developments, it is easy to beat our chest about how much of the work has been done in country, but also what costs. So today, execution capacity, both in terms of service, providing services and operating assets, execution capacity is at a level today that is not comparable to what industry was used to, and not in any way what international standards are. And that's a problem we need to be honest enough to address if we think we can fill the gaps that have been these people. So I believe that we have to be very, we have to be intentional, we have to be deliberate in making the efforts that are required to recreate and domesticate these capabilities. It's not just something that we have to talk about. You know, this same industry, when in 1961 there was a vision for Nigeria as an oil producing country, in fact, that vision was passed down by OPEC as an organization. In the next 10 years, all members of OPEC must have the capacity to train certain levels of staff, especially at middle level. And that was how the PTI was created. And in those days, PTI was not open for just regular admissions. Operating service companies sent candidates into PTI to be trained for them. The intention was that by now, things like welding, all the technical services you need operating a typical, whether it's a float station or your wellhead technician, all of those should have been abundant here in Nigeria and actually be spread across West Africa to other countries. That was the intention. Very soon, PTI metamorphosed into university. There's still PTI, and then the University of Petroleum, the University of Petroleum was a footprint, Federal University of Petroleum. You would have thought that between those two would be the core industry training that would be supporting the independents that don't have that capability in-house. The footprint in front is just like any other university, can admit people to read to talk about anything once you can pass your job. So as a training center, they have almost no relevance to our industry. In fact, we do not have a training center that can supply the manpower pipeline that I've been speaking about. So we have to be very deliberate. The successful, competent independents that are in business now and a few more that we join, who know what the bottom line is, who know what they're spending as their budget every year and what they make as profit, they have to be intentional in funding the organization. Critical training centers that will support the industry, that will work in collaboration with international and competent training organizations, support the industry. This is not the only place that independents will be operating. There are other parts where IOCs live and independents operate. But independents additionally supported by competent third-party providers of the services you need, both research, training, and all other services. And that's what we have to recreate here and duplicate it. And that's why I say the efforts have to be intentional, collaborative, and well-organized. So between the service providers that have formed themselves into better and independent operators that are in IPPG and our professional organizations, SPE and NAPE, we have to design how to fill this gap. We have to have local dedicated training centers in collaboration with international training centers. I think we have to start as a regulatory framework to attract international independence into the mix. Let's subject ourselves as local independents to some competition. There are independents around the world operating to international standards. Let them come in here, either collaborating with us, in partnership with us, or competing with us. We can't stay here in our room and just enjoy the privilege of being the only ones in this sector, whether or not we're doing well. We can't. At least this country cannot afford it. And I also think that after 10 years of our local content, of the implementation of our local content, where several critical services have been set aside only for indigenous companies, I think by now we should have built that initial capacity that was intention for setting aside all these services to companies. It is time now from a regulatory point of view to start the process of opening up the services sector to international service providers. Again, let our service providers, our local service providers, who have had the benefit of 10 to 15 years of dominant space, they should now be subjected to proper competition. And because they should have built enough capacity if they've been doing the right thing. And be afraid of competition. So I'm saying we should reopen the service sector to full competition. It can be done. I mean, it can be phased out by the NDMB, but over the next 5 to 10 years, we should be back to full competition, where we'll have very competent local service providers, international service providers competing with them. Because at the rate we're going, all the service providers that we know about, that we have known about in this industry, will live here, only be the supplier of tools to local service providers who will run their tools for them. They have nothing to lose. Escalate the of those tools and still make their money. And the quality of services we get as an industry, that will be open to debate. So this industry, the duty of reopening it to full competition so that the local operators and local service providers that have of advantage take advantage of what capacity they have built and build much stronger capacity by being able to compete. I also think we'll be very, very deliberate in setting up 1 or 2 research centers that will fund properly to handle not the most sophisticated, not in the moon or going somewhere else, but some very basic research to support the industry. I mean, if somebody wanted, a Niger Delta, Niger Delta as a basin, the entire, we're just looking at things like pressure profile across the Delta. Things as simple as that. You are planning a well and you can just obtain the pressure profile, both in depth and in geography. That's not too sophisticated research that can be carried out. There are certain markers and so basic research to support us. We have to have such institutions properly and provide us with such basic research. The more sophisticated research findings, we can buy off the shelf or have people support us with that from outside the country. We have to bring the industry back to, international level, international quality of capability, basic research to support us, and a training structure and center that provides us with a pipeline of resources across board in the industry that we require. So when we speak about capacity development, these are the key issues you through the transition that has led us to where we are, the vacuum that exists, and now these are the key issues that we must tackle. And we have to be very honest with deliberating in these issues. So those are the points I thought I would share with you, as I said, in 30 minutes. And so, yeah, and then I will up to debate discussion. But those are my thoughts for this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Austin. Thank you so much. Those were very insightful nuggets that you've given to us. If I were an entrepreneur and if I were some of us on the call, I think I got quite a number of business ideas from you. So thank you so much for sharing. It was so good, really, because in my mind, I hadn't really thought about, capacity development in this sort of space, right? But now you've made it clearer that the gap created by, the IOCs going and, some of the issues we are facing, investor funding, etc. That gap, needs to be filled by, us here ourselves, right? And you've also listed a couple of actions that, we need to embark on. Things like, opening up training centers, research centers, very important, right? Because we need to fill those gaps. Have a couple of, the people that worked previously with the IOCs, they are retiring and all of that. So we need to fill, the pipeline, people, the younger generation to fill up those spaces. And of course, they need to be trained. So you've listed training and research centers as one of the key areas we need to develop in our country. if we need to meet up, the energy needs for our nation. And you also talked about the regulatory framework. We should also, not face to service providers, so that, to sort of drive competition in the industry. So not just being a local champion, we need to other service providers from outside the country to come in and drive competition. Then you also mentioned the research centers as well, to help in, again, filling up that competency, building competency, building the capacity that we need to further take our to the heights that we need to get to now that we have a couple of the IOCs sort of leaving the industry. So thank you so much. Those were very insightful thoughts. And our listeners, they were able to get quite a number of nuggets from what you had with us. And just now, I know that there might be a couple of questions from the listeners, but we'll leave it open to, during the panel session. And good self, sir, who is also part of that panel session, right? So please sit back and hang on while we move into the panel session.
Thank you.
Okay. So now the next up is, introduction of the moderator, and we're going into the panel session. And the moderator for this session is Mr. Otome Afiegbe. So let me tell you a bit about Otome. Otome is the African Operations Modern West Advisory Incorporated. He is a registered engineer and an international certified professional across various fields, including sustainability, project management, business analysis, and QMS. He is also an alumnus of the University of Texas, where he studied data science and business analytics. Otome currently leads the Modern West Advisory African Business Unit as Managing Director. He is providing carbon markets, carbon offset projects, ESG advisory, GHG accounting, and cycle analysis consulting services companies across various industries in Africa. Before pivoting to sustainability, ESG at WA, he worked for over 17 years in the energy industry in senior roles across different disciplines, including reservoir engineering, commercial, business development, strategy, and project management in various energy companies. He was a co-chair for Career Guidance SPE Legal for the year and remains an active volunteer across different committees. So Mr. Otome, I welcome you gallantly to this event. I will hand over the panel session to you. So Mr. Otome, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Uju. And I think we'll go straight ahead to introducing other folks in the panel. And when I read their profiles, I was almost telling Uju, please just keep my profile aside and let's focus on the panelists, because they have loads of experience. They've been in the industry, have outstanding journeys. And I'll just start with Engineer Chikeze Wonsu. He's a senior executive with over 3 decades of both local and international experience in the oil and gas industry. And he's managed stream oil and projects, new business development, divestments and acquisitions, midstream gas and downstream refining. Mr. Wonsu has worked with leading international oil and gas companies and retired from Walt Smith Petroman in March 2023. That was 2 months ago, after delivering 5,000 barrels per day modular refinery in Nigeria, which is one of the independent refineries in Nigeria, and also the acquisition of the EG-23 block in Equatorial Guinea. He also was the person that led the acquisition of Asa field in 2021, which Walter Smith on a good trajectory. In 2023, Mr. Wonsu returned to his parent company, Tolia BV, as the EVP Development and founded HSI Energy Resources Nigeria Limited as Tolia's in-country affiliate. And he currently advisory board to the chairman of HES Holding Oil and Gas Nigeria Limited. So he holds many degrees, an engineering degree, which is also known as nuclear and engineering science from the University of Ife, an MSc in physics from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. He's a member of several professional organizations, including SPE, and he was SPE Nigerian Council Chair in 2017-2018. And he's a member of the SPE Nigeria Board of Trustees, one of the board of SISL. He's also a member of NAPE and currently serves on the advisory of the Nelson Mandela Institute of African University of Science and Technology. So you're welcome, Mr. Chikeze, Engineer Chikeze Wonsu.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chikeze Wonsu does just fine. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But I have something for you to talk. I'll come to that later. So let's go on to Engineer Mrs. Oluseyi Afolabi. Also a very seasoned professional with 4 decades of experience. And she has held a lot of senior roles. In 2017, she retired from ExxonMobil as an executive director, also roles, senior roles in commercial and new business development. She was the only female on the 8-man board of directors of 3 ExxonMobil Nigerian upstream companies. Prior to her elevation to the board, she had several technical and managerial roles in Nigeria and in the US, with assignments spanning across Africa, Asia, Pacific, Caspian, and GUM regions. She's a strong advocate of girls and women development, which is an excellent feat. And she was an advisory committee member of ExxonMobil Women Interest Network and continues to provide mentoring to high-performing women who desire all-round success. Well done, ma. And to date, she's an active member of the SPE Nigeria Council Board of Trustees, and she was the first female chairman of the SPE Section 61 in 1997-1998. She's a BOT member of the University of Lagos, Faculty of Engineering, Greater Cookite, and Nigeria American Multicultural Council, Houston. She's a member of the Nigerian Society of Engineers and a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Chemical Engineers. She's married and blessed with children. You're welcome, Engineer Oluseyi. So we have Mr. Tahir Salhuddin, and he's project manager with 2 decades of experience in the oil and gas industry. He has degrees in geology and petroleum engineering, career in NNPC, and he's remained in NNPC, which is now NNPC Limited. Upstream and upstream gas supply and infrastructure projects experience. He had the opportunity to work with several cross-functional teams across the oil and industry. He's currently the head asset and investment management of NNPC Gas and Power Investment Services, where he manages NNPC Limited, LNG, power and gas-based industry portfolio. As an active volunteer, Salhuddin has played local and international roles for the professional body. He's happily married with 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. You're welcome, Mr. Tahir. And I see you believe in diversity and inclusion, 2 boys, 2 girls. So I'll welcome all the panelists. I think Mr. Austin has done justice, put together those figures. They are mind-boggling. The fact that we have less than 5% penetration of clean cooking, of LPG market, and you have people using biomass. Over 90% of folks using biomass in the country it's staggering with all the resources of the numbers going to over 200 TCF of gas available, and with another 800 TCF of gas resources left untapped. So the question is, why is it that we are finding it difficult to bridge the gap? We have the resources, but we are experiencing energy poverty. And hence, this topic is very apt. The topic talks about sustainability. So if you look at the topic, there are certain keywords: sustainable, which means able to be maintained, energy future. So if we don't have an energy base now, how can we have a future? And then capacity, which has been well described by Mr. Austin. We simply need to develop capacity. So this topic is very apt, and kudos to SPE for, thinking about climate, change, being conscious about that. They decided to have this panel virtually. So I did a rough calculation. So assuming we're about 100 on the call, we're saving about 300 metric ton of CO2 equivalent. Yeah, you can argue with me on that later. So this panel is star-studded, and we're going to get a lot of nuggets. These are folks that have gone through the industry, seen the ups and downs. They are trailblazers. They have several accolades under their belt. And, when I reflected on their journeys, I said, I think I'm going to give them nicknames, but maybe I'll leave that to later. So let's jump right in, because of time, into the panel for the day, and really look into this topic. And we're going to look at it from different lenses. So we're looking at it from professional capacity and development. So Mr. Austin talked about education. We'd also look at it from a finance perspective. We'll look at it from technology and innovation, and then also policy and government incentives. So I'll go straight to Mr. Chike Wonsu, and we'll be looking at capacity development and education. So we have a huge population of over 200 million smart and hardworking individuals, but we simply don't have the funnel of professionals to handle simple and complex services, procedures, like Mr. Austin highlighted. And so we have to rely on experts and professionals from overseas to handle these delicate tasks. So there's obviously a challenge with the education system. So the question, what can we do? What can be done to bridge the gap in technical capacity development in the educational institutions so that we grow industry-ready professionals? So what can be done by the private organizations, public organizations, and the government? So I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'll very quickly talk about, let me call it a cradle to entry approach. And entry is entry to the industry. Now, a lot of national organizations, the Society of Petroleum Engineers, NAPE, have outreach programs where they reach out to people at the primary school level and talk to them about energy. It's critical that those conversations continue, because a couple of things happen at that level. This is the level where children, take in the most in terms of learning and how quickly they can learn and how quickly you can adapt them to the direction you want the country to go in. So these I think it's energy for me, outreaches and all that have to continue. And once they get an understanding at that basic level of what the need to have energy professionals in the industry in Nigeria is, then you've also created the opportunity for them to choose energy relevant courses when they go into the higher institutions, but actually when they go into secondary school as well, because that outreach is continued there, where they'll pick up some of the courses that are relevant for them to play in the energy industry. It's not as if all the other courses are not relevant, but of course we know that there are some technical discipline areas that are very relevant to the energy industry, and that's where the gap really is. So they have to go, after that, they go into the universities. I would not tamper with the curriculum at the primary and secondary level. I will allow them to go ahead with a curriculum that allows them to pre-qualify for entry into the university to study courses and use professional organizations to do these outreaches. Now, when it becomes very critical is when they're about to go into the university. With the professional organizations, everybody hands on deck, even NCDMB, NUPRC, NNPC. We must start working on modifying the curriculum in the universities for these energy relevant courses so that they become industry relevant when they graduate. Part of the reasons why Shell and some other companies started this intensive training program for graduates is that they discovered that the graduates we're getting from the Nigerian universities were not industry ready, okay? And we have to do that. So I know SPE is working on something. They have a group of professors from universities that are working to find the curriculum. It will include NSE, Nigerian Society of Chemical Engineers, COREN, whoever. We must have a coordinated effort to make sure that the curriculum in Nigerian universities for petroleum engineering and geosciences is relevant to the industry. We also, along those lines, must make sure that those who are going to the university have industry experience while they are there. So these internships. One of the things I continue to encourage in Adax Petroleum and Watersmith was, irrespective of how small these companies were, we could take in 10 to 15, undergraduate interns at a go, okay? And, you can imagine what the larger companies could actually do if small companies at Watersmith could take in 10, 15 for every cycle, and the cycle is about 3 to 6 months. So we must encourage them while they're in the universities to have practical hands-on experience within the industry so that by the time they are graduating, they're industry ready. That is, I'll stop there because I'm sure other people want to contribute, but that's the cradle to entry approach so that we have industry ready professionals when they're about to enter the energy industry. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chike. I think this is very interesting. But just to deepen the conversation around that, talking about industrial training internships, I know SPE has put in a lot of effort in this space, but there's usually a pushback from the companies for different reasons, logistics concerns. So at the end of the day, a lot of these internship programs are not fully accomplished. And a lot of people are hanging, students are hanging, they can't go through those very life-changing experiences. So are there smart ways that companies can, accommodate this interns? For example, maybe have hybrid programs, maybe virtual, fully virtual, or mixed or blended. You think that that's an approach? Back to you, Mr. Chikeze.
Okay. That would work for some kind of industry experience. If it's an office-based type of industry experience, that would work. So for example, some kind of risk engineering training, maybe geoscience training and everything. But if you're talking about people that have to have a field experience, and quite honestly, I encourage anybody getting into the industry to have experience. I don't think that virtual way of having a hands-on experience in the field actually works very well.
Yeah.
What I would suggest is that, you see, these companies pay a lot into this, I think it's the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, okay? And a lot of the things you talk about, logistics and, maybe they have, how many people do they have that can train these people and take off time? There may be cost, yeah? And if some credits can be given, I don't know how you change these policies or how these things are done. I will leave it to my senior colleagues like Austin Navarro to flesh out on if they know how we can approach this. But there has to be some incentive. And I specifically target the Tertiary Education Trust Fund and the NCDMB. I don't know what they do with those monies, quite honestly. Yeah. Now, if this can be targeted, because why are we as an industry paying huge amounts of money for tertiary education if we cannot apply some of this money to as an incentive, so we don't have to pay so much, and as incentive to have graduate interns or undergraduate interns come into these companies and actually have that experience? I have a feeling that if that cost element part of it, which you call logistics, there may be other issues, is attended to, companies will be more encouraged, because bottom line is a business. They'll be more encouraged to take in more interns. Okay.
Thank you very much for those points. I think, yeah, those are things that can be chewed further, but you've highlighted some critical areas that can be looked at, some solutions to that challenge. I'd like to go on to engineer. And you've seen the industry evolve over the years. You've been through a thing over the past 60 years. So much has happened. We've had a paradigm shift from the international oil companies to indigenous players taking the center stage, the likes of Seplat, NDP, Watersmith, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to just ask a blunt question. Do you think the Nigerian energy sector is ready to go fully indigenous? And what would be your suggestion to the government, for example, on how to divert these assets that are being divested to competent indigenous players who might not necessarily have funding initially?
Okay, thank you. First, as a country, we are lucky that we have a very entrepreneurial and resilient private sector and citizenry. And I say this right. As I said, if you take the banking sector, it took 30 years to build it, but it started in 1989, 1990. Gave out licenses to Nigerian banking institutions. They did not cancel the licenses of the existing banks. Bank was here as NIB. We had First Bank that had always been here, Union Bank, UBA, and IBTC. Those were the, IBW, with AfriBank. Those were the 4 banks that we grew up to know. But through the resilience and entrepreneurial spirit I'm talking about, the Nigerian banks that were given licenses, those that were able to build capacity, when the time came by regulatory fiat that they had to build a certain capacity and there were measures and so on, those ones survived. Those that couldn't build capacity, we don't even remember their names today. As I said, we had 126 banks. We came down to 24. In those days, 10 Nigerian banks could not finance a $10 million transaction. Today, one Nigerian bank can finance a $200 million transaction. So it's not as if it hasn't happened. We have seen Globe, an indigenous telecoms company, compete with a South African company, MTN. And between the 3 or 4 of them, we have over 100 million lines today from 400,000 in 2001. But the point is not about how can the industry go fully indigenous. The point is about proper regulation that allows the indigenous players who are able to build capacity, compete along with even international independence and survive. The same thing with service providers. And I'm saying, thankfully, we've had a first mover advantage. Because of our local content laws, it's been almost exclusive, that is divestments and any assets becoming available, having exclusively given to indigenous companies. The same thing, there are certain aspects of services provided to the industry that have been exclusively left for indigenous companies. And I'm saying that over the last 10 to 15 years, the serious ones have built enough capacity to no longer be afraid of competing. So for the operators, I'm saying it is time to open up the space for international independence to join the mix. And for service providers, it is time to start by regulatory framework, gradually opening up the space to proper competition, to full competition, where international companies can come out and compete. What you are then going to have is a mix of strong, Nigerian independent in the service sector and as operators, and a few, dotted here and there, a few international service providers and international in the mix. I believe that Nigerians, those who are prepared to build the capacity, will be capable of competing. What you don't want is to then have 40 independents and only 10 of them can actually deliver the goods. And then you have 30 others spoiling the waters, muddying the waters for everybody. Everyone, as I keep saying, then we start blaming the victim. They don't know what they're doing, and it generalizes across them. So that can only be done by well-organized and dedicated regulatory action. NUPRC has to set both the timeline and the standards that they want to see in the industry. And through those standards and implementation, you are going to have an industry of competent operators and competent service providers. It is the central bank that created the bank industry we have today by regulation. It didn't just happen because the people wanted to do it. It is the NCC that created the telecom sector we have today. NUPRC has to step up and ask themselves, what do we want this industry to be in 5 years? And they have to create that industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, that what you said is key, because the regulator has to step in and take charge. So, Engineer Oluseyi, I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts around how to fast track this process? Because we have the first movers advantage, but we're now lagging behind, and we need to step up our game. So what are your thoughts around how we can quickly breach this technical capacity gap? Of course, we're working closely with the regulator. Do we need to set up more research institutes, merge multiple service companies together? What are your thoughts around this?
So first and foremost, good morning, everyone, and I thank the organizers of this symposium, because I think it's really good talk, and we need to definitely talk about it. My internet is a bit unstable. I'm having power issues, but I'm sure it keeps going up and down, so I hope I'm able to stay. Now, my thoughts around what should we do. I'll start with the normal cliche, which everyone says. So, Nigeria, we're not lacking of, we are lacking of the will. And, the regulators, but, they've been there for quite a while, and they have put a lot of things in place. But then you have to ask yourself, what has been always the effectiveness of our regulations? What has been the effectiveness vis-a-vis business? Because at the end of the day, what you want to create is an environment that there's ease of doing business and people feel comfortable about doing the business. So, creating more, I would say that's typically not my style. My style is to look at what I have right now and actually use it to the maximum extent possible. All the various around us as a people, the various things that we have put together, the various regulatory bodies that we have, they have been not very effective. If I take, for instance, how long has Nigeria been talking about, gas flaring, no gas flaring for, we've been talking about this right from when the Petroleum Act was actually put together. But what happened? We kept on delaying and kept on delaying it. So the will is missing. I think we have a lot of structures around us within the oil industry that we just need to make sure now that we are actually working on what the intent of that policy or regulatory organ is. I agree, NUPRC needs to step up their game. but it has to be backed up with very intentional, and I borrowed that word from Austin, intentional plan. What is the end game? We have to start with the end in mind. We just don't jump into things. I've seen a lot of that in my many years in the industry now. I've seen a lot of, oh, they're doing it in Norway, so we got to do it in Nigeria. Oh, they're doing it in Nigeria, bring it to Nigeria. We don't have a good view of what are we trying to accomplish here. And so it's back to strategy. It's back to beginning with the end in mind. What exactly are we trying to achieve as a nation with all the talk around us? So I'll start with that, and we can keep going on. I'm glad that my internet stayed stable.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's very useful comments. I think you know, when I think about this, some things that I pick out from the comments so far, I think collaboration is the underlying word, and one easy collaboration that already exists in Nigeria but needs to be strengthened and tightened is the industry and academia. You know, we see that in different parts of the world. You know, the US, where you have partnerships with universities and companies, and you see, you know, university undergrads churning out massive projects, and once they come out from the four walls of the university, they are ready to go. Most of them even go into startups and do great things. So these are things we're doing. We need to also, you know, tighten that up, and you know, all the other things that were mentioned, you know, around the regulator, and then strategy as well, having a clear strategy or pathway. So let me go to Mr. Taluddin Tahir. So let's look at local content or indigenous capacity development from another perspective. Let's look at it from our communities, the communities we operate in, and the communities that give us freedom to operate, our FTOs. So I believe personally that developing the communities is an important aspect of capacity building. So how can Nigerian energy companies ensure that local communities benefit from their sustainable energy initiatives? What strategies can Nigerian energy companies employ to enhance community participation and promote inclusive growth? Because yes, we have all these regulations, but we still get a lot of complaints from the community. So something is missing. So what are your thoughts around this?
Thank you so much, Otome, and thank you for having me also, SPE Lagos. I think from Mr. Oburu's presentation, and I must say it was a wonderful presentation, because it got me to think. Joy also said the same thing. Training, you know, basically the kind of training that was offered in the past, is that kind of training still existing in the industry? Yeah, I remember when I was employed, I got to different, you know, I got different exposures from different companies, Shell, Chevron, you know, because we were working together. But today, independents are moving in, right? And these independents are the same kind of persons that would run their operations, build the required skills and competence in the local in their local settings, just as you allude. Now, in the past, and I will tell you from experience, I remember when I was employed, I was sent out to one area in Delta State. They were doing seismic acquisition, and it was a Chinese company. What did that company do? The company picked one person from each family within that community to work with them. But that was a temporary thing. Fine. They got that kind of experience. What were they doing? Basically following along the lines, over cables, geophones, and so on and so forth. But once that thing ended, those guys are back to base. Nothing else, unless if maybe there is another opportunity in that community, such a similar kind of maybe activities. One of the words I would hang on to here in the theme, sustainability. What is sustainability? Sustainability, and I remember in one presentation that I made recently, I tried to make it as simple as possible. So for instance, in our offices, you go into the toilet and use that toilet. You have to ensure that that toilet is clean so that the next person coming in would be comfortable. That is part of sustainability. Sustainability is also ensuring that that toilet is maintained till the next decade. Anybody that comes in says, this is good, the toilet is good. So let's go back to the set. Now you go into a community, you engage people, menial activities, you finish your job, you leave. What have you left them with? All basically maybe nothing really, tangible. So if you see, for instance, what Mr. Chikeze also said about shell intensive training, the center in Warri, right? They had similar kind of activities for these communities where they would come in and learn skills that they can use for centuries. Centuries in the sense that you use it for decades, you can train your children and the children will train their own children and so on and so forth. Can these independent companies that are taking over these communities actually sustain that? Especially considering the fact that it comes with a cost. You're struggling with cost of equipment to enhance your production, security issues, and so on and so forth. And you want to build capacity within the community. So it is a very, very big question. And then we go back to regulation, which has been mentioned here. Regulation obviously is enforcement, right? You're coming there, you're seeing, okay, what are you doing? Are you doing the right thing? How can it progress? So those regulations have a base, actually. You have policies, right? Policies are how you intend to carry out certain activities. And then you have processes. The process is how to execute those policies. And then regulation, where you would come and say, okay, these processes must be adhered to. So do we have those right policies? We have the processes. So can regulation actually come in to ensure those processes are strictly adhered to for the benefit of that policy to come to fruition? So these are a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So I think coming back to base, and I'm sorry I had to go around. I just wanted us to have a clear picture of the situation we are in. I think having the right policies, you deliberate policies to ensure those capacities, those skills are entrenched in the communities. Then you have the processes to ensure that those policies that are well thought out are actually entrenched within the communities, and then regulation, proper regulation to ensure those processes are followed through to achieve our ultimate objective at the end of the day. I think these are the basic principles to ensure that that capacity development is actually achieved within the communities for a sustainable future in those communities and the country as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was smiling when you talked about sustainability because that's an area that's my day job, and I love the example you gave. Sustainability is basically optimizing the resources now, but ensuring that you have those resources available for future generations. So, and if you look at Australia, for example, the LNG industry, they established a supplier development program, and what that did was that enabled growth of the local supply chain. you know, and same thing also in Norway. And kudos to some Nigerian energy companies. And I would like Mr. Chikeze also to speak about this briefly. Like NDEP and Walter Smith and a few others, they've reeled out programs that continuously train local folks in the community. So, Mr. Chikeze, would you want to just give us an overview for the benefits on the call so that they can take those nuggets and probably see how they can apply, you know, the same framework or, you know, have the same mindset as they engage the communities?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to touch on something very quickly.
Okay.
And it's related to the answer I'm going to give to you. Now, one of the things I think I heard Engineer Shea Folabi and Austin Avru talk about was about, you know, I'll use the word collaboration. Now, both in the service industry and in the E&P industry, I think it's not about creating more. It's about finding a way to make the ones that are already there to collaborate and grow in size and capability to deliver. I'll just use a very quick example. In the E&P industry, you know that NDEP, that's Niger Delta E&P, Walter Smith and First E&P, and a company called Petrolin are collaborating in the ND Western Consortium. Okay. Now, they run their own independent businesses, as you very well know, but that consortium was big enough for it to take a stab at saying, let's go and take over the entire 30% equity that SPDC has. Individually, the different companies there could not have had the courage to do that. But collectively, they managed to show that with their history and their experience and all that, they are able to chase that, you know, let's call it that big view of saying we will replace Shell. Now, you find out that when those kind of collaborations happen, there's a critical thing that happens there that is important, you know, for Nigerian companies to understand. A lot of these individual companies are still locked up in what I would call founder governance. There's still too much of the influence of the founder of that particular company or the founders of those particular companies. That's one of the things that NNPC complains about. But you see, when they come into this collaboration, yeah, they necessarily have to lose that founder influence. Necessarily have to lose it, because who's going to be the founder of the collaboration? And if they're not able to lose that and de-emphasize that, that collaboration is not going to work. So you find out that ND Western probably has a very good corporate structure, principally because you cannot talk about who is the founder of ND Western, but you can talk about who are the founders of the individual companies. It's the same thing in the service industry that, you know, I am trying to recreate. So if you look at HSI, when you say founder of HSI, HSI is actually 3 different service companies that provide end-to-end services. HOBAC, of course, a lot of you know about HOBAC. So the H there in HSI is HOBAC. They are involved in well engineering, you know, well services and all that. You have JSH, which is a facilities company, and you have Insight, which is a subsurface studies company, development company. So we're testing out the waters to see these are independent companies. Let's bring them together under the same roof to be able to perform end-to-end services. Okay, so that color is important. I wanted to speak on that to emphasize that point, both for the service industry and for the E&P industry. Now let's come to this community development. We have to get beyond artisanship and some of these kind of low level jobs that my very good friend in the Taher talked about, because those things are very temporary. They're not sustainable. I like his use of that word, sustainable. They are not. The contract ends, everybody goes away. Community restiveness is actually worsened through that process. Let me explain why it's worsened. You give these people 6 months to a year and they earn very good salaries, okay? But you don't give them the tools to go beyond that 1 year. So they have to wait for it to come back again. What happens in the period between where they have enjoyed themselves for 1 year and when the contract comes back again? They have to find a means for survival. And what I've discovered in Walter Smith is that they take that opportunity to go and start attacking the pipelines. So that's the company they form after that, if you want that. So the experiences they gain in pipeline laying contracts and everything gives them the opportunity to go and bust your pipelines later on, because it is not a sustainable practice. What did Walter Smith do differently? And I think NDEP and many other companies are doing this. We started a technical skills acquisition program, which means that it is not about applicants. We're looking for operators, we're looking for petroleum engineers, we're looking for reservoir engineers, whatever I call well engineers. And we train them from the communities. And we promise them to hire them. So there are certain certifications they can go through. And we're trying to get, I think, before I left, we're trying to make sure that the next program has certifications like IADC certifications or whatever it is. Yeah. So that these people have a certificate that even if we cannot hire them in Walter Smith, they can be hired in other companies that need those kind of services. The first program we ran, we had 200 candidates from the communities. And, sometimes when I hear, oh, these community people are not, they don't go to school. That's not actually true. I was shocked to see that there were 200 graduates meeting the criteria we set from those communities. We couldn't train 200 because of our size, so we trained 50 using indigenous trainers who had also run the SITV program for Shell. And out of the 50 that were trained, I think we ended up hiring 15 of them into Walter Smith as operators and for that planned growth, both in the refinery business and in the upstream business as well. Now you can understand what the impact of that will be if other companies take this approach, okay? So they don't even have to start up their own technical skills acquisition program. They can look for the ones that have been trained by other companies and hire them in. And that is what is sustainable, to be quite clear. That is what is sustainable, because people have almost a job for life. Yeah. So, and they are your ambassadors within the communities. So we found that that worked very well. And the moment we started the technical acquisition program, quite honestly, Walter Smith stopped being attacked by the communities. Yeah. Unfortunately, I wouldn't mention the other company that is there with us. They focused their attack on that company. And I had to intervene and tell them that we are brother companies and we're doing this together. So you can see that once you win the hearts and mind game with a sustainable way of delivering to the communities in terms of skills, then you will solve a lot of the freedom to use that the communities have. Finally, on the part of the larger training programs, I know that ND Western, because it's a consortium and is big enough, is starting up a training program at the Shell Warri Training School, I think in Ejeba. And they're trying to model it similar to what Shell was able to offer. But you can see why they're able to do that. It's about size. And so collaborating to create those kind of entities that have size, to go ahead and deliver this is important. Please remember, never forget, my Oga Austin is here, that CEPLAT was the first kind of that collaboration. It was Shiba and Platform. Yes. So although you call it CEPLAT now, I think it was one company, it is actually part of that kind of collaborative consortium. So more of that is necessary in our environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chikeze. I think one thing I want to highlight from this is an added value could come out from having a database. So a company goes ahead, invests in training 200 people, for example, just 15 persons are taken. Can other companies, other energy companies in the same space, both the servicing and producing companies, access that database so that they see, these other, 185 individuals who have been trained, who are equipped, good to go? It might be something that we start thinking about, and that speaks to the collaboration you just talked about. Great. So this is a common question that we get a lot, and I'm sure everybody on the panel and on the call, they hear this from time to time from students and young professionals who want to get into the industry. And I'd like to direct this question to Mrs. Oluseyi to get her wisdom on this. So where would you say is the best place to jump in the energy value chain as a young graduate in Nigeria? what's the juiciest part of the value chain, looking at the upstream, midstream, downstream, that is still highly untapped and has high potential.
Okay, so if you kind of like bucket them in the upstream, midstream, downstream, then that's a different bucketing. And somehow in the value chain, I believe that it's just so much that it doesn't matter where you are in that value chain. The first mindset is, what do I want to learn? You know, and I will keep saying this over and over again, that because I believe, just like Stephen Covey said, it's one of the very habits of highly effective people. You must always begin with the end in mind. So exactly what am I trying to get out of life? You know, so, you know, how do I see myself in another 5, 10, 15, 20 years? So everyone just needs to have that kind of like personal. There's no part of the oil and gas that's it's not juicy. Maybe you would say downstream in Nigeria, everything is Naira denominated. So maybe I don't want to earn Naira, so I would not go to downstream because I'm that Naira denominated. Maybe I want in the midstream, which is now where gas, you know, is, and it's the transition fuel for the future. So maybe my future is better assured if I go into the midstream where, you know, gas to power, gas to LNG, CNG. So maybe there's a bit more assurance there. In the, you know, upstream sector, and even if gas is the transition fluid, we still have to develop those resources. Now, from my personal experience, and I've been mostly in the upstream, but I've had, you know, bits and pieces in all aspects of the industry. I used to joke with my colleagues that the reservoir engineers are the bedrock. The geologists find it. We determine how much, if it's commercial or if it is not commercial. And then we are there in the development phase, trying to make sure that we now are able to quantify just how much we're looking at here. We're there when you're producing, because we want to be sure that you're producing at a rate that's maximize your ultimate recovery. So I always say to people, I love to start at reservoir engineering. Even when the projects people are developing the facilities, you're still there making sure, you know, my facilities are able to produce my fluids at the right, you know, flow assurance, flow assurance that I put in place. I don't want a situation where I'm having slugging or all kinds of other things that are going on. So reservoir engineers, the lights, reservoir engineers turn out the lights. We're there until the economic limit. So maybe I'm being partial, but that's the way I say it. So for a young person, you know, I've had the opportunity of doing almost everything. So I started off as a reservoir or a rustabout in the production field, and then to reservoir engineering, and then, you know, into strategic planning, and then into construction and project management. So I've been offered opportunities, you know, to do almost everything. But one of the things I would say that really helps a lot is that time I spent in reservoir engineering. Because out of my working life of about 33 years with an IOC, you know, I spent 10 of those years in reservoir engineering. So I'm a hardcore reservoir engineer, and I think we put on the lights and we turn off the lights. So for any young person, you might want to look at that. But it's always better to go through the full suite of activities. Just be open. You know, there's no part of the industry that is not juicy.
Yeah, thank you very much. So our young professionals, you've heard it from a seasoned professional who's gone through reservoir engineering, commercial, new business development, and so on and so forth. There's value in all those functions, but it's good to get your hands dirty, you know, and you know, tighten the bolts and nuts. So thank you so much for that insightful comment. So let's switch gears. I think My favorite song is "Money, Money, Money" by ABBA. I remember my dad, had that turntable and put the plates and we used to dance around. So it all boils down to money. Cash is king. And before I go into the questions, just to talk a bit about where we lie today in the world. I mean, traditional sources of funding for energy projects are dwindling because investors' sentiments are shifting from fossil fuel investments. So these days, they look at potential opportunities through the ESG lens. They have ESG considerations. So, how you performing with respect to the environment, social and governance. And, it's time for Nigerian companies to start looking in that direction. How am I doing? How's my ESG performance? Am I, adopting responsible and sustainable practices? How am I, taking care of the environment? How am I taking care of the people who work for me? The communities, we've talked about that. Governance, you will find some investors asking you, how many female leaders do you have in your team? So those things are becoming more critical. And then, of course, investors are interested in companies that, are invested in local content development. So people who try to improve the economies of the environment they operate. So I would like to ask, engineer Mr. Ostavuru, given the current situation of things with respect to funding, access to funding for fossil fuel projects, what strategy can we employ as a country and as independent or indigenous companies to attract capital that is needed to unlock our vast resources? We talked a bit about resources. We have them, they are in the ground. The IOCs are living, so they are there for the taking. So what can we do, pragmatic actions to really access capital to develop these resources?
Thank you. You will notice that the few E&P independents that you can say you can beat your chest are doing pretty well here in Nigeria. Funding is not their problem. Everybody makes it look as if the biggest challenge to us growing as independents is funding. It's the other way around. When you put your house in order, if you have the right governance structure that enables somebody to trust you to put his money in the business you're doing, whether it be a bank or investors. If you have the right structure and you demonstrate competence and all the things that come with corporate governance, you will attract funding. You permit me to use Seplat as an example. When we started, you will say that at that time, yes, there's plenty of funding available to EMP companies. But since then, I mean, our first tranche of loans came in as acquired the assets years later, $550 million. By 2015, we borrowed a total of $1 billion. Nigerian banks provided 650, foreign banks provided 350. Okay, and then by 2017, we did our first bond. And with that bond, foreign banks, we paid off, we exited on Nigerian banks. We've since done a second bond of 650 million with a coupon that is the first coupon for the first bond was 9.25%. The coupon for this current bond is 7.75%. If you compare that to typical borrowing rates now, where LIBOR, I don't know what the new name is called, it's almost 5%. Even at LIBOR plus 5, you're talking 12%. So if you have a bond at a coupon of 7.75%, it doesn't get better than that. But that's an indigenous company. Again, all of this comes on the back of the governance structure that enables international fund providers to trust them. If you pull out the 2022 annual report, which you can pull out by just logging onto Seplat, you see that all the ESG issues that are described there you will report your ESG compliance. You even report your carbon footprint measured. It's there. So you have to operate to international standards to be able to attract the funding you're looking for. You know, Chike has mentioned, you know, ND Western. Look at First EMP. First EMP started from scratch, didn't have a dime to even develop his block. Went around between partnerships, equity injection, and sweated to put the structure in place and eventually got the funding to develop the asset. Within 2 years of producing the asset, they're almost debt free. And typical EMP companies, debt normally comes in one of two areas. Either when you're just trying to develop, grow an asset you just acquired. You need some debt to acquire the asset. But if you work the asset well, within 2 or 3 years, you should be debt from the initial acquisition debt. And then it is up to you to don't run your business in such a way that you have enough cash reserves to do the business. That's how the EMP business is. Going forward, the typical funding you used to get from banks, if it's not available, you have to provide the funds. Once upon a time, we had Shell that had Shell Capital. They had over $35 billion in reserves, and they were lending to others. So typical EMP companies, unless they're doing big projects, they don't even borrow. They have enough resources to plan their growth, and that's the way we're going. So for you to be successful, you have to be prudent. You have to show execution capacity. Your governance structure should be such that you can be trusted. And once that is done, funding will not be a problem. You will, I mean, it's always a problem that will be solved, but I'm saying that it will not be a showstopper. You know, just emphasizing, it comes down to governance. You must run a company that the person providing you funds can trust. You don't do that, you'll be running around in circles, particularly when you borrow to acquire an asset. And in the first 3 years, you are not. You see, you must create a debt production. You must create an incremental production higher than what it was when you acquired the asset to be able to service the debt with which you acquired the asset. And then in the first short 3 years, maximum 5 years, those term loans are usually 5 years. But in 3 years, if you are doing the right thing and you are helped by oil price, you will exit that acquisition debt. But let me tell you how dangerous it is when you don't do the right thing in the first 3 years. You then get to a point, your debt is up, you can't borrow more than your production, and your declining production is not enough to service your acquisition debt. You get into that conundrum. And that's why you see some assets 10 years after acquisition, they haven't been able to drill a well, they haven't been able to do anything to add to it. It's not that they don't know what to do. Once you get it wrong in the first 3 to 5 years, you get into that vicious circle and you hardly be able to get out of it unless you then go for substantial equity cash injection to bail you out of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, it's all about transparency. Like you said, and once that is clear and it's seen, you know, it would you would be more attractive as a company. So thank you very much, Mr. Austin, for highlighting those points. So there's risk.
Just a quick one. Is it
okay? Please go ahead.
Permissible if I leave now?
Okay. I think we're going to take a group photo. So we're about rounding.
Okay.
Maybe we'll just round up with the last question, and I think I'll hand that over to Mr. Taludin. What's your take on technology and innovation in, you know, sustainable energy development?
Yeah, thank you so much, Otome. Technology is there to make things easier. 1, 2, technology is there to make things faster. So if I look at easy, fast, and then technology is also there to ensure that you produce, or rather whatever you're doing is done at an optimum or most efficient kind of manner. And for our industry is such that we leverage a lot on technology. I'll give an example. For instance, when we were talking about shale sand, shale gas, shale oil, in the past, it was not economically viable to produce from there, but technology was able to break that barrier. It is very, very important, but technology also comes at a cost. So if you want good technology, if you want recent technology, then you should be ready to pay. The other speakers have spoken about collaboration. They've spoken about access to funding and so on and so forth. For us in Nigeria, yes, we're moving into a new regime, no doubt. You're having international companies that have robust research facilities that are always up on their toes, improving technology. Today, they are stepping out. We're having new players on ground. To get that technology, you need funding, basically. And I'm pleased to hear what Mr. Aboru mentioned, which is very, very true. ESG now, because funding, we have to agree that funding for the oil and gas industry is becoming more and more constrained, more and more restricted because of obvious reasons. Fossil fuel is basically being demonized. Funding now is majorly based on that ESG. He spoke about governance, to ensure the environment is well taken care of. You have to ensure that every social aspect around your operational areas are also being, operated at the most optimum manner. Companies are in that, yes, no doubt, Seplat, clearly you can see companies changing their names. For us, for instance, in NMPC, we're going through a transformation process. Today, we have a fully fledged arm that handles sustainability because we recognize that fact. We need to access funding. You have to have that. And the only way you can improve your technology is by accessing those funds. So it is very, very, very critical to us, like technology. Collaboration, I want to add, because, and permit me to do that, I think is something that is also very, very critical. At times, we just restrict ourselves to the oil and gas industry. We look out. But there are a lot of other factors that actually affect us. So technology, you need funding. Funding, you need financiers. You need investors to come in. Now, do we have that enabling environment to bring in the financing? Do we have the enabling environment to bring in the investors? I think it's something that we need to think and look at. Just of recent, I had the opportunity to sit around with some investors looking at the possibility of coming into Nigeria to bring in some substantial investments. And one of the questions that they asked was, if we're coming into this space, what kind of tax would we be faced with? And I did a quick dig around. I had to call back the office because this was outside the country to say, okay, if you're doing this kind of business, what kind of taxes would you pay? I was shocked as a Nigerian when the answer came back. 19 taxes, 19. Some were from the education sector, some were from finance sector, some were from environmental sector, and we're the oil and gas industry. I think that collaboration that my elder brother here, Mr. Wosu, is advocating is very, very important. It shouldn't just stop at the companies. We should look outside. If we want to have that technology, because that technology comes at a cost, you have to bring in investors, you have to access funding. We need to look out. 19 taxes for any investor is heavy. So we need to sit around and agree and advocate, to the government. Look, we need to open up our space. We need to sit down and not double tax, not double regulate. You have one regulatory arm running a certain part in the industry and another one outside the industry doing the same thing. It's really frustrating. So technology is very important. It is the cradle for our development and enhanced maximum viability and return of investments. The only way we can do that is by sinking in more funds. Those will come through funding, it will come through investment, collaboration. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, we can go on for the next 1 hour, talking about, this very important topic. There are so many other things, like, for example, you talked about risk. There's a lot of risk, and it for businesses to come in when they don't have that stability in policies, and they are worried that policy can change. So many things to talk about, but I think we've run out of time. So for the purpose of Mr. Austin Navuru, who needs to jump out now, I think we should take the group photo, and then maybe afterwards we can just go around the room, around the panelists for 1 minute and just get their final comments. Can we take the group photo now?
Yes, we can. Oh, John.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or in the afternoon. Good afternoon once again. Can you turn on if you are in the panelist interface, can you turn on your videos so that we take some pictures? Okay. All right, it's coming up. Thank you, everyone. Now, let me just quickly spotlight everyone whose video is turned on so that we can quickly have everybody in the same view. Okay. Gallery view. All right. Okay. Thank you. I see everyone. Thank you very much. Put on your smiley faces and let's.
Priscilla, please.
Yeah, Priscilla is here.
Priscilla,
Section chair is here.
Okay.
Hassana, BE, one more person. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm clicking right away. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. We're done here.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Austin Navuru. I know you need to step out, but please, the other panel, can you just give us another 2 to 3 minutes? I'd like to go around the room and just get your final comments. So I'll start with Engineer Oluseyi Afolabi.
All right, just to kind of round up everything that we've been talking about, we started off talking about the paucity of funds in the industry, because now everyone is looking at cleaner fuels, the likelihood of this industry becoming extinct. I would say that we disagree with that view. I think what the world is asking for is an improvement in the technology. And at RFS, that's one of the things that we're actually trying to promote. That's, how do you industrialize without combustion engines? And now you use a lot of combustion engines, and the problem that we have is that the combustion engines are not able to process your fuel up to that stage of carbon dioxide. We emit a lot of carbon monoxide, and the carbon monoxide, being unstable, quickly in the atmosphere and then converts it into carbon dioxide, which the plants need anyway. And if the plants can take the carbon dioxide, then they give us oxygen back. And so I believe that we can create an energy balance, with fossil fuel. What are we going to do without fossil fuel? there isn't a lot that we can do right now. They're everywhere in our lives. They're everywhere. Everywhere you look, everyone that's wearing a dress or a shirt this morning has buttons on them. That's petrochemical product. You know, whenever you take your capsules and they're surrounded with stick around, that's petrochemical. So it's going to take a lot, you know, to put this industry into extinction. It's going to take a lot, but we're hearing, and technology is at the bedrock of us making sure that we become a sustainable industry as ourselves. So for the young people who are looking at petroleum engineering and saying, do I have a future? I really, truly believe that we have a future, but it's had to be a future that is technologically based, that we're very sensitive to what people are asking us to do. Engineers, that's what we do. We make life comfortable for people. We make life livable for people. So we need to just put on our thinking caps to say to ourselves, how do we ensure? Because if you look, and this is another thing that I like to also put out there, people say the petroleum industry is a depleted, or the petroleum is a depletable resource. If you look around these days and consider how many other countries that did not have an oil and gas industry in the last 10 years, but do have now, we're discovering more and more and more of these natural resources every day. And somehow we want to make sure that it becomes extinct. It just doesn't, the equation doesn't add up for me. So I believe that what we just need to do is to consider what people are saying back to us. How do you make this not a pollutant in the industry? How do you, in the world, how do you make this not a fuel that's, you know, it's just destroying the environment and destroying the world? And I put out there, I don't have another planet to go live in. So this is the planet that I have. And as an engineer, I'm going to make sure that I can live here sustainably, even for my future generation. So definitely this industry is here to stay for a long time, but there's a lot that technology has to do in it. And for us as Nigerians, my favorite word to every Nigerian out there, let's stop being pedestrian in the way we think. The world is moving at a real fast pace, and we just seem to be pedestrian. Very, you know, when people are going to space and coming back, you know, on a daily basis, we're still talking about walking on foot in Nigeria. It's not about, you know, the policies. It's not about the regulation. It's about how you make sure those regulations are delivering. You put a policy in place, you must make sure that the intention of that policy is being delivered. And, you know, Engineer Tai talked about something now, which is the double taxation. Every time you think about the JV, and if I was an IOC too, I would exit this country, because it took us years to put a policy in place, to put an act in place that is not favorable to doing business in Nigeria. The PIA is not favorable to doing business in Nigeria for anybody. So for as long as we make doing business in our country difficult, we'll see exit, because dollar moves to where dollar is best maximized. And so as much as possible, we've just got to make sure that we're international. We want our to be successful, and we're doing all the right things to make it successful. We have enough structures, we have schools, we have training centers, all the things that were built before. They're in shadow of themselves now because we were not intentional about what we wanted to get out of those things. So I could talk until the cows come home, and so I'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for participating. Mr. Chikeze, 30 seconds to 1 minute, please.
I'll do my best. Well, first of all, to thank Austin Avuru and all the other panelists, including the moderator, for doing an excellent job. I'll try and summarize very quickly. One of my big brothers, Wumi Ledare, talks about the Africa energy trilemma. It relates to Nigeria as well. And that trilemma is about the fact that Africa needs to produce and consume more energy. That's number one, because there's a direct impact between energy consumption and GDP growth. The second leg of the dilemma is the fact that there is clearly a need to transit to cleaner and renewable energy. Very clear, and the world is doing that. It affects the ability to fund projects. Africa, of course, does need that funding. The third part of that trilemma is that the impacts, although Africa does not emit so much in terms of the percentage of CO2 emissions in the world, the impact on Africa is severe. Yeah, because this pollution does not just stay in one part of the world. So even if they are polluting in China, the effects can be felt in Africa. That's the trilemma of issues that Africa has to chase. And it's how do we address this? So the keys include, especially for E&P companies, is how do you demonstrate a sustainability path for oil and gas companies? You need to be able to demonstrate to anybody funding you at this time that although you're going to increase the energy production, because we have to, remember that's the element, you have to be able to measure that increase versus CO2 emissions. So I would say that the parameter that you should be concentrating on is to lower CO2 emissions per unit of energy generated by E&P companies, whether it be scope 1, scope 2, or scope 3 emissions. And that lends itself to what Shea Afolabi talked about in terms of energy efficiency. So we need to introduce not only transition to renewables, but even for the fossil fuels, we need to be more energy efficient. Nigeria needs to have a mixed energy portfolio. And it includes, so it's oil, including refining, gas as a transition, gas as an enabler for lower emissions through blue hydrogen, where you can convert, methane to hydrogen, and then we transit to renewables, solar, hydrogen, etc. We talked about ESG, ESG-driven investments that demonstrates that the the environmental consciousness towards gradually reducing carbon emissions and sustainable energy. It needs to be an important part of your portfolio. The S reflecting social investing in communities, we talked about that, to alleviate poverty and deliver the energy needs to promote socio-economic activity, and then critically, the governance to demonstrate that independents are successfully moving away from what I will continue to term founders' governance to proper and transparent corporate governance by embedding policies that allow independence of corporate boards, diversity and inclusion, which the moderator mentioned, transparent financial and supply chain processes, auditable regulatory compliance, and HR policies. Last but not the least, this is now the role that we talk about government, the safety and security of investments. We need to make sure that government supports us in mitigating above ground risks, because a lot of investment onshore and swamp is held back by mitigation above ground risk. I can tell you, Walter Smith, for example, and a lot of other companies have suffered from the downtime on the TNP since May of 2022. So we have to mitigate those above ground risks so that when you take the investment, you're able to pay back. Stability in monetary and fiscal policies. India, Afolabi talked about the PIA. Is the PIA actually encouraging investment? Is it safeguarding investments? I'm not quite sure it is, but let's have it as a start and see how we proceed. Monetary policies are also all these things around foreign exchange, interest rates and things like that, they are critical to make sure that investors know that they can pull out their investments, they can make money and pull out their investments, plus the profits that they intend to make. And this must promote investors' confidence in the energy environment in Nigeria. Lastly, Salahuddin, I'm going to crack a joke with you now. You said there were 19 taxes. I can bet you between that time you had that conversation and now there are over 20 taxes. And this has to stop. This is over-regulation of the energy industry, because, that's the point. It will not attract foreign direct investment if this continues. Now, big uncle of brother, let me say, Osnavuru, mentioned about the investment that have been trailing off in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. There was a presentation he made that showed that 7 years ago, attracting $25 to $30 billion a year of investments. That has come down to less than $7 billion a year. And if you notice the oil production, it is also following that. People think that all that oil production drop, not meeting the OPEC quota, is about crude theft. It is not only about theft. There's this minor component of it that is crude theft, that's the above ground risk, but there's a major part that investments are not coming in. And these investments need to come in for us to solve this energy trilemma we are in. Thank you very much for having me here. And I wish the rest of you, everybody, the panelists, the key speaker, the moderator, SPE Lagos section, and the audience, a wonderful year in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chikeze. I think you've summarized it very well, and I think you've done my job. So I would just add one more thing. I think that risk mitigation is very key, and it's been highlighted not to flog this, but having a good ESG framework, being transparent is very key, critical, and collaboration, be open to collaboration. Those are the things I'll just highlight beyond what Mr. Chikeze has said. And so I would want to hand over to Uju. Time is fast spent. Thank you so much, SP, for organizing this. Maybe we need to create time next time for this sort of topic. So thank you very much, and hand over to you, Uju.
Otome, thank you so much. I mean, this was a really fantastic panel session. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Mr. Chikeze. Thank you for sharing all the insights. Thank you, Engineer Oluseyi. Thank you, Madam. We are very grateful. Thank you, Mr. Austin. And thank you, Mr. Salahuddin. Thank you so much. We appreciate all the insights that you've shared on this topic. I think this was one of the really good topics we've had in a very long time. I learned quite a lot. So we appreciate you all. And to our audience, thank you. We see that there are a couple of questions in the Q&A. Unfortunately, we are out of time. However, we need to responding to some of your questions, and if possible, if you can drop your email address, we can also send you some responses, panelists, if you want to hear feedback from them. So please feel free to drop your email addresses as well, so we can get some responses back to you. So thanks everyone. Otome, thank you for the great questions. You made it really engaging for us, the listeners. We appreciate you. So right now, we're going to go into the vote of thanks. And for the vote of thanks, I'm going to call up Mr. B. Awotiku, Programs Chairperson for SPE Lagos section. And he's going to take us through the rest of the event. B.
Thank you very much. Please confirm that you can hear me.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Awesome, thank you. All right, I think it's been a very rich and robust discussion and discussing on the topic, creating a sustainable energy future for Nigeria, the opportunities for capacity development. I think we've had excellent discussion on this, and I want to especially thank our keynote speaker, Mr. Austin Avuru, Executive Chairman AODIS Limited, for the excellent presentation that he gave. Excellent speech that he delivered. It was really, really, really rich. I also like to really appreciate the panelists, Mr. Chikeze, and the founder HI Energy Resources, and also the EVP Tolia BV in the Netherlands. I want to appreciate you for always we call you, and also being a big father to SPE Lagos section. Thank you very much, sir. Also, Engineer Oluseyi Afolabi was one of our panelists. Thank you, Ma, for your excellent and rich insights and that you delivered during the panel session. We appreciate you and thank you so much for all you do. And we also want to appreciate Mr. Salahuddin Tai, incoming Council Chair of the Nigerian Council, for also the rich insights that he shared during this robust discussion. And also Mr. for the excellent moderation. I think you did an excellent job being able to direct the discussion. And thank you so much for how you were able to steer this discussion. So on behalf of our section chair, I thank you all for the excellent delivery of this discussion. I would also like to appreciate our senior members that joined this call. I saw Mr. Egbert Momo, 2013 SPI president. Also, Professor Lale Kolafui, former Nigeria Council Chair, SPI Council Chair, for joining. I also saw on the call Mr. Etago, and that was in Nigerian Council, former Nigerian Council, also SP Port Harcourt section chair. Thank you for joining. Mr. Michael Oyeri, also our former section chair in this. Thank you for joining this symposium. To close, I would like to appreciate the people that put together. They've done an excellent job at the background, and themselves and the committee members, Chimiri Alim, our special project, and also Asala Salami, special projects chair, for the excellent delivery of this event. Thank you so much for all the wonderful work that is delivered this session. In closing, I would like to appreciate everyone for joining. So thank you for joining, and thank you, an excellent audience, listening to these topics and this that was shared today. For our upcoming, we have a Workbook Day that's been ongoing, and Workbook Day was celebrated on April 23rd, and we are still collecting books, and that we're going to be sharing on the 30th of this month to people that need this book. So if you have any book that you are not using, specifically targeting kids in primary schools, and if you also think of donating towards this course for us to buy to the schools, please do reach out. We are accepting educational books, and also books that can learn from. And we also have an event coming up this Saturday to celebrate Children's Day. It's a fun fiesta for children. We'll be going to Ajegunle to have this event, and it's going to be on Children's Day. We'll look at it, and if you would like to volunteer for this event, please do well to reach out to us, and we'll give you updates. And if you'd like to also donate and sponsor this event, please, we will still receiving funds to be able to deliver an excellent event. This is in the SP Nigerian Council event that's been delivered by SP Lagos. Also connect with us on SP Lagos section on LinkedIn, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and you can also some of our videos on replay on YouTube. For registration of SP membership, if you want to renew it, if you want to renew SP membership, or you want to register fresh, contact our officials, Odion Okosun, who is a section admin, Milesi Ziwani, our membership chair, and Ogunleye, also our co-membership chair, for your renewals as you want it. We have numbers displayed on the screen, and also please do well to reach out to them. With that, I would say thank you very much for joining us today. We thank. Please look forward to more events from SP Lagos section, and ensure you join us for all our future and upcoming events. Thank you for your time, and do enjoy the rest of your day.